which is an expert career advice with Víctor Mayoral and Ricardo Telles with insights on how to create your own robotics startup. So without further ado, take it away, Ricardo and Victor.
Yes, because becoming an entrepreneur in robotics is an interesting career path that any of you can have. Also, it's a possibility. Many of you may have an amazing robotics idea that you want to start your own business, but how to commercialize your idea, how to find investors, and how to deal with them, how to find target customers, create your very first minimum viable product, and start making profits. We are going to learn the answers to all those questions with the hand of Víctor Mayoral, who is a serial entrepreneur in robotics. He has already built 3 companies, Alias Robotics, Acceleration Robotics, and Alias Robotics. Today, he will share with us his valuable experiences on creating and growing robotics startups. Let's give a warm round of applause to Víctor Mayoral. Victor, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, hi. Excellent. Are you going? How many startups have you created in this weekend? Because you are a serial entrepreneur in robotics startups, so many.
None this week. Certainly none this weekend. But yeah, sorry guys. There's a horrible storm right over here. So if you guys lose me, just know that it's precisely because of that. But nevertheless, really happy to be here and sharing my 2 cents on the startup field and topic.
Okay, so then we have established that you haven't created any startups this weekend, along this week, sorry, but in your life, okay? So how many startups have you created?
A few, I would say. I personally, I'm not really fond of the serial entrepreneur.
Oh, sorry. I called you like that. Sorry.
Never mind. That's how it's called in industry. But I personally like to think more about it from the sense of sort of like embarking myself into fields of interest intellectually, especially in the field of robotics. That's pretty much where I have worked my whole career. And each one of my startups was actually trying to address a problem found either in the robotics industry or in the surrounding fields. And so far, the count, I think, goes as far as 5. I just invested in my 6th startup.
Wow.
Let's see how that goes. But yeah, a few.
Okay, yes. And I think that I can understand what you mentioned about not calling this as a serial entrepreneur, because you say something interesting. Is really, you didn't, if I understood correctly, you didn't create a startup just for the sake of creating startups. It's just because you had some passion about some field and you saw the opportunity to deliver to the world something that can be useful and that can help. Is that right?
Absolutely, Ricardo. And I think I speak for myself, but certainly many here listening to us right now know for a fact that you're one of those really good entrepreneurs. The reality is that I never really got interested into entrepreneurship or being a business person. Those were things that I sort of like found boring. And I still even nowadays don't become, or I don't feel very fond of those things. Not even now, but the reality is that eventually things, when you start solving problems, push you in certain directions, which make you an entrepreneur. But I never really got excited about the concept of entrepreneurship or related. I just got excited intellectually by problems in robotics, most of them technically related, and how essentially solving those problems could lead to adding value to end customers. That's sort of like what got me really passionate and how I started projects, so to speak, which eventually, some of which became formal companies, some of which failed completely and never ended into anything publicly related, at least.
But then what did you study in order to follow this path? So probably something in engineering, but what else? Because just by having engineering skills, you cannot build so many companies.
Well, you'd be surprised of how many great engineers out there are very capable of starting businesses themselves. But answering your question, As many of us, I became an engineer. I did 2 engineering degrees, computer science and electrical engineering simultaneously. I was a good student, so I finished quite promptly those, and then I engaged into the research path, which eventually got me into working into open robotics, but in the very old times. It was called at the time Open Source Robotics Foundation. Unfortunately, when I started my journey in robotics, the construct wasn't a thing just yet. So I couldn't take some of your courses, which I frankly find pretty exciting for the newcomer to robotics, and I very
Thanks.
much vouch for it. But yeah, my path was a bit bumpy, I would say. So I knew about the lower layer aspect related to electronics and electrical engineering, and I got sort of like a good education on the higher level aspects related to computer science and systems architecture and related. So sort of like combining them both, I got the know-how required, or part of the know-how required to start building robotic systems and robot brains, which is something I've always been very fascinated. And that's how I got into this mess, I would say.
But then did you, so in order to create the companies, you have to upgrade yourself with some extra skills, because I know that you were managing, for example, several people. So I wouldn't say big teams, but I mean, definitely not small teams, for example. And then, so creating minimal viable products, finding the clients and so on. So how did you get all this knowledge?
You learn by doing,
By
frankly
doing, okay.
speaking. To be honest, I did attend some business trainings and some. Oh, wow, that's a storm. Sorry, guys. And frankly speaking, those helped out. But there's so much pollution in the startup world right now with what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. There's even degrees about entrepreneurship, university degrees, which I find hilarious at the very least.
Yeah.
My path was more related to the technology, the know-how under the hood on that regard. And then on speaking and finding my way, bumping into mistakes and speaking with customers. One of the things that you learn after a few years in industry as an entrepreneur, but also as an engineer, is the relevance of understanding your market, understanding your customer, and sort of like that is the hard path that got me into it. Sure, I mean trainings on business related matters help, but frankly speaking, when you're doing something so new, and frankly speaking, robotics is pretty new still to the
Yeah.
majority, there's not so many people that can support you with lessons or inspiring experiences. And I'm sure, Ricardo, you yourself experience much of that as well. So,
Yeah.
frankly speaking, you just learn your way by doing, making mistakes, engaging with communities, sometimes the wrong one, sometimes the right one, sometimes you
Yes.
need to pivot.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you. I just was
No,
nodding
no,
and saying yeah because I agree with you. Sorry.
no, it's
Yes, yes. Okay. And then about the opportunities, okay? You mentioned you have built several companies already, startups, and then for those you need to identify the opportunities or problems that you want to address in your startup. So how do you do that? Is just by inspiration or by thinking or by observing? How can you identify where to put the next egg? Let's say just
that's great. Yeah, that's a great question. In my case, it was mostly through my network and through experiences. So, as a robotic says, you get exposed to certain problems, and if you're willing to go beyond your area of comfort, the zone that makes you feel more comfortable, then there's a huge landscape of opportunities for roboticists, unexploited. So I've always been curious about those things that didn't exist and that those things that were not done but could be done eventually. I've always been fascinated by what robots and AI could do. And so that's sort of like how these opportunities came up. But there's a disclaimer into all of this, which is that we technologists, often the case, fall in love with the technology behind
yeah.
some of these opportunities and sort of like lose the business way. And that is something that if you listen to experienced company players or ex-entrepreneurs or people who have failed or succeeded with startups, often the case you listen to sort of like the same melody, which is focus on your market, understand your client needs, and go towards those. Solve that problem. Don't fall in love with the technology you think it's going to change the world. Change the world by helping your clients.
That's a very good point. But what I see on the wall out there is just a few people doing this, what you mentioned, and many people focusing more on getting an investor and getting money for keeping the company alive. So how do you reconcile this? Is that because they are just faking, let's say, the process, or is because this is one stage that is necessary in order to get to the other one with the clients? How do you explain this situation?
Well, I mean, certainly there are many reasons. I guess two relevant ones is the fact that the Silicon Valley pathway and marketing overall affected us all in the rest of the world too much. We sort of like bought the Silicon Valley way and missed the fact that in a huge way it's just a bubble, a huge bubble. That's one aspect of it. The second one is that it's easier to face investors, which often the case are fools. Fools, I mean, and please, nobody should get offended by, but most investors in the field investing in robotics know enough about robotics, frankly speaking. I've spoken with hundreds of investors, and I'm still to find one that says reasonable things about the field itself. So often the case you see that those ones interested and active in the field are actually pursuing things into it and not just throwing money around. So the fact that investors are easy targets in a way, and it's easier to convince these fools to invest in your idea than face the market and solve a problem, makes many entrepreneurs just look for that. I mean, it's just way easier to just raise a few millions, cash out, and then take it easy, put yourself a huge salary, which is not in concert with the market, so to speak. Bootstrapping is really, really complicated, but statistics actually point out that those entrepreneurs that bootstrap are more likely to be successful.
Is it? Oh, okay. So that's good, because then that's our case. So we are going to get there. So I hope that this statistics is true. I hope. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, and let me ask you about. So can you explain, because with this this conference and this interview specifically, we want to make the audience learn about the possibilities of how they can develop their career in robotics, and one is startups. Then so maybe some of them, they don't know some of the terms. Then I would like you to help me on defining some of them that are important when you are creating a startup. And the first one is about the business model. What is the business model and why is it important? Which is related to your answer you just had.
Sure. In a nutshell, a business model is how you make money, in simple terms. Whether it's through offering services or via selling your product or doing robot as a service. There's a portfolio of business models in the field of robotics. What's important is that the way you make money, aka your business model, is something that scales, something that is consistent with the market, and something that ensures and secures you sustainability as an entrepreneur, as an individual, as a group, as whatever you're building.
And why do you say that is important, for example, that it scales? What does it mean that it scales?
Right. So one of the aspects that make a startup and not just an SME or a company.
Another company.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. That doesn't make another company, right?
Yeah. So essentially, is what makes a startup and so special in a way is the fact that the business model should be to a certain extent exponential, and that means that it scales essentially in a non-linear way. So as you keep dumping resources into building up that business model and the technology related to it, you start getting more and more revenues and more profit. That is sort of like the discourse of startups. And it depends who you ask. There are many definitions of what startup is, but most people tend to agree that there's a pretty important technology component into startups, and that's what makes or should help them make and adapt to this exponential growth curve.
Okay, I think that then is clear for the audience what is the business model and what it means to have a business model that scales, allows you to scale. And can you tell us any business model that you have applied, that you have used in your companies, so the audience can maybe understand if they can apply themselves also, or they have to invent new ones?
So sure, absolutely. So across the experiences that I've had, one pretty common one is just selling products directly. So in one of my past companies, we were selling robotic kits, and in a way, those served as individual products. So you could logging into the page, select one of our products, put them into the cart, and just pay and fetch it. So that's a very simple business model that works out. Selling hardware in robotics is complicated business model, but certainly works out and has been working out for many companies for many years. Another business model can be what's often denominated just offering services. That's also something that some of my companies nowadays do, offering services in the form of robotics consulting, helping others realize their robotic creations or projects, or by offering added value to robotic setups. For example, one of my companies does robot cybersecurity. And so what they do is they offer a portfolio of services wherein they can help you secure your robots either via defensive or offensive actions. So those sort of like services are yet one more way to pursue business in robotics, another business model in a way.
So I would say that from what you said, that the second business model from the cybersecurity is more scalable rather than the other one about selling the robots on your webpage, right?
It depends very much of your product. It depends very much of the execution. So you could say that doing services might scale because it sounds closer to the customer and to the value you're adding to each one of the projects. But the reality is that offering engineering services requires you to grow your team in concert with the amount of engineering services you provide, which means that your human resources becomes a total mess because managing people is, trust me guys, more complicated than doing robots. That's, I guess,
I completely agree, 100%.
yeah, I guess most roboticists tend to agree that we like robots more than people. So I definitely sign that up. But yeah, that is one common thought: the fact that services are more tied to the client and to the value offered. But the reality is that for every new service, you need to sort of like develop a new intellectual property that you're offering to the customer, so to speak. Whereas when you sell a product, you design, implement, and build once, and then you sell it at scale. So some may argue that actually selling hardware and products in robotics is actually more scalable. Frankly speaking, every single case needs to be analyzed. My experience so far has humbled me to not make assumptions and to just dig deep into each company's business model and analyze carefully whether that has scalable potential or not.
Okay. And what about? So let me put you a question here. So what about the difference between software products for robotics rather than hardware products? Then would it be software? Would you say that software products are more scalable? Like, for example, an example of software product that for robotics, that would be those systems, those companies that provide telemetry data for your robots, so you can know what your fleets are doing and so on. So they install those servers in all the robots. So I think that this would be more scalable rather than in hardware. What do you think?
I wouldn't pinpoint, or I would not say one is more scalable than the other. It's based on my humble experiences, but frankly speaking, software is one of the unsolved aspects in the current state of the art in robotics.
Yeah, that's very
However,
good.
however, yeah, I know you and I shared this and have had lots of side discussions and are on the same page, Ricardo. But I'm sure I think you may agree also with the fact that even though it's one of the big problems, it is also increasingly becoming a commodity, meaning that many people just take it for granted. And some are just not willing to pay for a fleet management system if you already have some ROS, I don't know, packages that offer you those capabilities at
Yes.
maybe certain above or under value. I don't know, but many people has this sort of like attitude, and so I often speak with many software companies trying to sell robot software that very much struggle to
Yeah.
make business due to the fact that the current landscape is changing. So one thing that I can convey of my humble experience to the audience is that I would just take a step back and analyze things from first principles and just don't take for granted what a robot is. In my humble opinion, a robot is a system of systems, a network of networks, if you wish, and robotics is the art of system integration, which intrinsically means you need to essentially put together software and hardware. So often the case, the most successful businesses put those two together into a business model that leads them to maximize the value they add to their customers and thereby to great scalability.
Wow, that's impressive. I think that you gave here some gold and here for the audience, because one of the questions that we are trying to solve here in this conference is, so I want to work as a roboticist somewhere, and then what should I do, software or hardware? And then the answer that is getting, in this case, from terms of business, because other previous speakers, they explain in terms of knowledge or applications and so on, but now you gave this explanation in terms of business. So is the business is in the combination of both, and do not get one of the parts only for like the part of your business that is only I'm doing only this part and then somebody else will do the other one, or something like that, right?
I would agree with that statement. And frankly speaking, robotics is still, as a field, is still on its infancy. There's, if you critically analyze the companies in the robotics field, there are not so many huge robotics companies. And by huge, I mean, I don't know, a few thousand employees. There are not so many of those. So we are still on the very, very early stages, testing things out, testing ideas, and things may just take a turn in the coming years. Who knows? We'll see. But if anything, I'm definitely betting on a robotic solution, which intrinsically means keeping both things very tight together, software and hardware,
Excellent.
and of course connected to the business value.
Excellent. Then you are answering here another of the main questions of the conference is now a good time to jump into robotics? Yes, you hear it. This is, yes, is a main super yes now. Okay, then for those that decide to jump into the robotics by creating a startup, can you define what is a minimum viable product?
Sure. An MVP essentially is the first prototype that shows value to your customers. That's I think a simpler way to understand it. Often the case, some people call an MVP that thing that you bring to investors and show it off to raise some cash. That's irresponsible. I think it does the job though, and honestly, I've never done that myself. I've been tempted, and frankly speaking, it wasn't like my network allowed me to that, because in robotics there are networks and networks. But a real MVP is that thing that allows you to go and show it to a customer and potentially just convince that customer to start building a proof of concept deployment. That to me is an MVP, or a minimum viable product.
Yes, and when you say that it provides value to the customer, means that they are willing to pay for it, right?
Exactly.
Show the money. So otherwise, it's just a good wish. Yes. Oh no. Yeah, I like. Will you buy that? Yeah, I would. Yes, if it were perfect or something, I would. But then buy me one. Okay. No. Not now. That doesn't count as a minimum valuable product, right?
I don't think so. Some may disagree, but my experience says differently.
Okay, I do agree with you on this sense. And how have you validated? Because there is a concept of validating your minimum viable product, which means you show what you have and then you check if the people they are willing to pay, they are willing to give you the money. So that will be the validation. So which methods or which strategies have you applied in order to validate your minimum viable product, MVP?
The market is the best validator ever. Just go hunt for customers and see what those customers have to say about your MVP. I mean, don't stay in your lab. Don't stay within your group of friends who believe that you're just making the next big thing in robotics, and then stay in that cave and come out year and a half with something that nobody wants or is absolutely not needed. Just face the market as early as possible. I often the case advise the startups I invest in or the ones that I get personally involved in to work on spirals. This is something that I learned very early during my roboticist career, which is the fact that you develop on a spiral something that is an MVP on a small spiral, as small as possible, that fulfills the basic requirements of your customer. And then you start making higher or bigger and bigger loops around that spiral concept and adding more and more features and more value. That is definitely the best validator, the market, and how I would approach that validator, which is in a spiral.
That would be the lean startup method, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Kind
you can
of.
call
Kind of.
it. Yeah, I mean, sure, it is. It is, and like technically speaking, that's what the lean startup method is based on.
Okay, I'm just throwing some words over there because of the audience. They are new, and I remember when I was new, and then all those terms. What are you telling me? So now it's time that they start listening for that for the first time, or maybe it's their fifth time. So it's consolidating in their mind. Yeah, so we are using this conference to teach them in the best way that we can.
Makes
Excellent.
a lot of sense. Yeah, my not to discourage anyone in the audience, but my only comment is that the lean startup method and all those books related to it pretty much focus on a software-centric business assumption. That is a very different reality from the one we live in robotics. It takes a significantly much more effort to build an MVP, a real MVP in robotics, than it does take in a purely software web-oriented business. So stay resilient, I would say, and that is what it takes in robotics.
Yes, 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 definitely, yes. And also this connects with what you said at the beginning, which is about talking to your customers. You said this at the very beginning of the interview, that was a very important point for you. And that's what it's allowing you to do those spirals, because when you present the product, then maybe they will say, no, nobody will buy it. And then that's not the end. So that now when you talk to them, but why? What's a problem? What is the characteristics that you would like, or which ones are you using for, or products are you using in order to solve this problem that my system is providing, or something similar? And then you get this feedback in order to improve the minimum viable product and repeat the process, right? That's the importance that you mentioned about talking to the customers, if I understood correctly.
Totally.
Okay. Okay, great. Then let me switch to another term. It's about creating the company and the team and so on. So how did you select your co-founders or the initial team members?
Good one. Well, when you start for the first time, typically you pull from your network, colleagues, friends, sometimes family members, the so-called three Fs, friends, family, and fools. That is how you select your co-founders and initial team members. And over time, you realize that that's not so bad of a strategy, because those those groups are the ones willing to give you comfort in a very, very stressful first phase, wherein you need all the support you can get to go through that MVP creation process. So something that I personally did that turned out to be tough but very successful is reaching out to people I trusted, either good engineers or good business persons, even family members. I did work for many years with my family members. And it is a tough thing to work with friends or university colleagues or whatever, because often the case, the working reality is very different than the friendship or family reality. But if anything, a startup requires you to be very resilient, to resist against all that tough scenarios that you face. And the bonds that you have with friends and with family members are more likely to stay, let's say, in place versus all these adversities. So my personal experience was very successful, trusting on people close to me. But then as you grow your business, you definitely should diversify, go way, way beyond your network, try to, as often the case it's said, hire people best or better than you, or just completely different to add heterogeneity to your team and ensure that it enriches the overall value in the team you're building.
Awesome. Awesome. And then, so there is one thing that is the company culture. Do you pay attention or too much, a lot of attention to that? So in order to enforce a certain company culture?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, often the case, startups are built around mission and vision. And upon those, you build up the company culture with key values and essentially things that all employees share. In a startup, you to work in a startup, you need to be inspired by what that company is pursuing. Otherwise, do not work or create startup, because there's plenty of companies out there who are willing to treat you much better than a startup might just be able to. Not because they don't want to. It's not that startups are meant to treat bad people. It's just that startups are very scrappy, or they should be scrappy by definition. And so struggling and suffering and working crazy hours is pretty much what's required in startups to kick off. So yeah.
Okay, and how do you enforce this culture into from the new people that comes? Because maybe you have created this with your close friends and family or people that you trust that you mentioned, but then you start to grow, and then that's a problem because the new people that come, maybe they don't share those values. So how do you manage that situation?
You don't enforce it. That's my line. At least of course this is my personal interpretation, but I just don't enforce the culture and the mission and the vision to new hires. I just very carefully ensure during the interview process that these people is aligned with the company values and culture. And if that thing changes over time, which sometimes happens, activities in life from colleagues may change over time. And when that happens, then you just find a way to part ways in the most respectable way possible. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. But as I said, I've had many experiences, I would say, after quite a few years, wherein people's priorities just change. And it's not so much that the company needs to enforce it. It's more like people's visions about certain things just change, and you just need to be focused on ensuring that the company mission and vision remain focused. That is actually the role of an entrepreneur.
Yes, and then that's also a role of an entrepreneur of taking those tough decisions that say, oh, it's up to here, and that's okay. No bad feelings or else, but it's up to here. And then you have to be mature enough to identify that situation and then take the decision. because sometimes the other person doesn't even realize sometimes that it has changed, but now it was aligned with your company and now suddenly it's not for whatever the reason that happened. And then I think it's important in the entrepreneur to be able to detect those situations and say what you said is up to here. That's it.
Yeah, totally. And again, I know in some regions, in some social groups, it's fancy to work in a startup. But trust me, guys, startup is many things, and fancy is certainly not the one at the top. Startup is tough, it's complicated, it's sacrifice. There's plenty of jobs out there who are better suited for those ones looking to enjoy and have better quality of life. Startup is for those ones with the hunger to change things, to invent things out. And that implies often the case huge amounts of stress, and as Ricardo, you're pointing out, personal conflicts and yeah, those ones stay with you. So expect to be stressed if you want to become an entrepreneur, and make sure that you're resilient to high levels of stress, because you don't want to find that out later on.
Later, exactly. Okay. Let me ask you, can I ask you about which errors did you make while building your startup that you can explain, of course?
Sure. I mean, I can be very transparent.
Okay, good.
Fortunately, after my experiences.
Because errors are quite examples of things for the people to understand what not to do, or maybe they are in that situation and they can identify that I'm in the same spot, so this can help me. The answer that Victor already has.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I really, really like about the American, North American, US culture. There are many things I dislike about US, but this one I particularly like, which is the fact that they get big from their errors, whereas we Europeans and in some areas in Asia, we sort of like are afraid of mistakes and
Yes,
errors.
shame.
So I can recount many of them. We don't have time to go through all of them, but I can point out a few that I think can be significant for the audience. The first one is gonna sound funny, but was actually listening to my investors and not my roboticist gut feeling. So when you accept an investor into your board, into your company, essentially you're accepting a boss, and that boss has sort of like the handle of the company as much as you allow it as the key driving entrepreneur. So I sort of like made the mistake of pivoting completely in one of my past modular robotics companies, completely towards one demand that I had from an investor who was a corporate venture capital, meaning that it was the investment side of a huge multinational company. And so this huge multinational company had some sort of like crazy idea that was way, way far from the market about building robotic chefs and robotic cooking. And sort of like because they were pumping the money, we decided to pivot towards serving one of their ideas, building robot arms, and leave aside what was a very successful business model, building autopilots and robot brains for UIVs and drones. We had other great ideas, but we sort of like we made that mistake. I made that mistake, and looking back, I don't blame anyone but myself. But be resilient and be strong with your own thoughts. If they are validated by the market, then don't let anybody just drive you away from your thoughts and beliefs grounded in the market. That's one huge mistake that I made. A second, I think, quick error that I can share is mistaking friendship from professional relationships. I mixed those early during my career, and those got me very bad sort of like results. So make sure to remain professional and be professional on top of anything, especially if you're a leading party in a startup. um, because your colleagues, your employees, whatever you want to call them, are really not going to look for the company in the same way you are. So make sure to treat everyone like you would like to be treated, and both be adamant on relevant things and flexible when required.
Excellent, excellent errors. I mean, the lessons from the errors. I mean, so that are actually are very common. They are indicated in several books or several places where you are trying to learn how to better build your company. So those are errors that we have, all many of us. So if you can save that from the experience of Victor, go ahead and take it.
I mean,
Then
if I may, real quick, in a couple of sentences, one thing that often
sure.
the case, like if I could go back, I don't know, a decade ago and
Hmm.
restart journey as an entrepreneur, I would love somebody to tell me the following: guys, building the next generation of robots, whatever that thing is, if you want to build your business, your robot fast, if you want to do it fast, then do it alone. Don't build a team. Do it alone or with as little people needed. If you want to, however, go very far, then build a team. And those things can switch from one to the other one eventually at some point in time. But keep that in mind. That is something that I paid really hard. So just keep that in mind if it's helpful.
Wow. Wow, excellent. Then I think that I'm not going to ask you more questions now because you closed perfectly and with a very, very good advice. And I think it's very useful for the audience. So please, audience, listen, listen and apply. Listen and apply. Then thank you very much, Victor. Now it's time for the questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Ricardo.
Let me
Always.
check on the chat. There is another tab on the side that says Q&A. Then you can write your questions there or vote for the ones that are already there. And I will ask Victor the ones that are most voted. Let me see what we got here. And let me see. So, because in the meantime, I have some. Yeah, the problem is so we have here from Rodrigo. Rodrigo he's nailing it tonight. He's asking many questions to all the speakers. So the question is, what area of robotics would you say is currently getting the most attention in the business world right now?
Humanoids, I guess, and I am not very fond of it. um, but anyhow, leaving aside my personal opinion on that, I think it's humanoids. And if I should mention a second one, is definitely AI robotics.
Uh-huh.
I definitely, definitely would focus on the second one, Rodrigo. That's my personal opinion.
Excellent. And a question from Vala that says, tell us about some networking places for robotics startups.
I mean, it depends very much of where you are from, your region. Frankly speaking, what works out very well is showing up in places like this one, the Construct. That gives you a huge network. Ricardo and his team have been doing a fantastic job for, I think, quite a few years now.
Thank you.
So you get to tap into a huge network digitally, online, and from your chair. And that is fantastic. So definitely this place. And then if you want face-to-face interactions, then just check out your local robotic clubs, check out local system integrator associations, check out um, if locally available ROS agrupations, ROS working groups, ROS national gatherings that can help you spread your network to a certain extent, but don't make the mistake to believe that ROS is the word of robotics. Just go beyond that. And of course, ROS is a crucial component, and it made the way and pathway for great successful companies like the Construct here. But just speak with customers, speak with end users, go to industry agrupations that include developers, but also end users and system integrators, and get to understand how the different stakeholders in robotics. So if I were to give you an advice, Balab, I would just tell you, go and sort of like flirt with the usual ROS groups and meetings, sort of like areas, but also just tap into the real world of robots out there and get to know what people is looking for.
And would you say that it is no longer required to go to California to build your robotics startup and to meet with the people that are alike in order to create a robotics startup?
Absolutely not needed. So I went when I was 24 years old. I went and started working in Silicon Valley as a roboticist. I was fascinated. I was walking the streets in San Francisco and the surrounding areas with my eyes completely open, believing literally that I was working into the cutting edge robotics technology and to the next thing. And certainly some of the things we did had an impact, such as ROS 2. I had the luxury of being one of the engineers building that up. But frankly speaking, a few years afterwards, I went to China, a few areas and places in China. And then I got to see the real cutting edge robotics. So frankly speaking, do not take for granted that things happening in California are the latest cutting edge things in robotics. You don't need to move from your chair if you want to be up to speed with the field. You have fantastic offerings right now, which we did not have at the time, such as the Construct. And by the way, I'm not hired by them. I just have full respect. And frankly, I look up to what Ricardo has been doing all these years. I definitely think he's one of the folks that can give you guys lots of value.
Thank you.
But overall, just don't make the mistake to believe that you need to go to the valley. Don't.
Okay, another question from Andrea Perez. And he says, what do you think are the most important things to consider when creating a startup and you only have the idea of the service product you want to provide? So how to start? So I think that this guy has an idea and then doesn't know how to, what next step, what do I have to put my energy into?
Secure. I think the most important, I mean, robotics is an area that again requires you to build a physical value. A robot is a robot because it's composed by sensing that perceives the world, computation and cognition that allows you to essentially make sense out of that perception, and finally actuation, which is a way for you to interact with the real world. Without that real interaction, then that thing is not a robot. So you need to build the thing. So Andrea, much to my, or I don't mean to discourage you, but you need to build that idea into a prototype. And so for that, you need to secure the funds. You need money. That money can come from family, can come from friends, can come from you working part-time somewhere else, as many of us did, by the way. So you need to build that thing. And often the case, by the way, there are robotic clubs, there are universities willing to offer PhDs and masters for very low wages or none at all. And they are widely equipped. These places, universities are way equipped. So go there and prototype your idea and build it up.
That's very good. Yes, that's very good. Okay, another question. I think we have still time, right? Yes. So here is a question from Ivan Boer that says, between robotics hardware, software, and services, where do you see the biggest potential for growth? I don't know, growth in which sense? In sense of the business, I suppose.
I mean, I would just, not sure if I understand your question properly, Ivan, but I will try to do my best answering, and I would just tell you that, again, robotics requires both hardware and software. Okay, so a proper robotics value demands you to assume you're going to have to be on top of all those things. Now, if you're asking me to whether it's better to sell hardware, sell software, or just do services, I just don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry. It depends very much of what you're really trying to sell on each one of those areas respectively. I know very successful companies in each one of those buckets. The one that I think is the most challenging one is software. But frankly speaking, that's the one where if you get it right, the scalability is mind-blowing. So tough, but huge opportunity.
Okay, I have one interesting here. I think that you can provide a very good answer to this one. It's from Julia Marsal. And then she says that if you have a hardware and you need some functionalities from the hardware which cannot be provided, so would you develop custom software applications to fix it, or would you change the hardware instead? So you need some functionalities on the hardware which cannot be provided by the hardware directly. So would you create some layer of software that kind of emulates or creates this, or you would change the hardware?
It really depends on the cost repercussion of this decision and your budget. It really depends very much. The easiest thing is just to buy the hardware and get rid of the problem. If you have the budget to do so, then do it. Pretty much.
Yes.
If you want to add on the technical depth and continue maintaining software, sure, just build your own abstractions that fix up the hardware problem. But I personally think that the easiest path is pretty straightforward, and it's up to how much budget and resources you have available.
Okay, then let me ask you one last question from Rushab. Then he says, should I start working towards a robotics startup, or should I work in industry first?
Definitely work in industry first.
If he is asking the question, right? If he doesn't have the drive, I mean, if he is asking the question, it's because he's hesitant a little bit, and then maybe so you need still to be more secure because of what you mentioned, because it's so tough. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about your background, so I cannot really comment on that. But it does sound to me that that you don't have enough market experience, and if you do not have that, then again, work in industry, detect a need, make sure there's business, and then eventually, if you have the drive and the skill set, then do consider building up a startup. Sure.
Okay, excellent. Then I think that we can stop here. We have extract a lot of knowledge and golden pieces from you. Thank you very much, Victor. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Likewise. I guess.
Are you going to attend the ROSCon this year? No.
No, unfortunately no. I sort of like have pretty big family things going on.
I know. So.
For the last period, and I'd like to keep focused on that. Having kids definitely is a big thing, and I'm taking it as serious as I can. And I think the conferences and those things can wait.
Okay. Then we'll have another opportunity to meet again in the future.
Definitely.
Thank you very much, Victor. A pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you so much, Victor. Very nice talk. Very interesting. I hope you guys were all paying attention because, like as Ricardo said, there was a lot of golden advice here from a person with real experience here. Love the conversations in the chat, almost philosophical at some points. Very nice. Keep it up there. And
what was happening? I was not reading.
It was just a bunch of conversations there. Quite interesting from Ruben and Ivo Georgiev. Very nice. Keep it up. Keep it respectful and everything. But this is what we want. We want people engaging in our conference. So make sure to rate the speaker. You should see the box right now, because at the end we will select the best ROS speaker based on your votes for this year's conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So that's the exact way to support your favorite speaker. So now we know we keep doing some fun time.
I knew it.
Yes.
We couldn't imagine. We couldn't.
So yeah, it's the prize quiz again. So the winner is going to have another super sweat box with the I'm a Robotic Developer t-shirt, coffee mug, and the stickers. So it works the same. We're going to watch a 5-minute video about a Robotnik. robot project by Robotekin. And at the end of the video, and we will see a question related to a product. So the first person who answers correctly will win the Sweatbox. And you may need to go to the page of the sponsor to get to the answer. So now let's watch the video, and you will see the next speaker in 5 minutes.
See you soon.
See you soon.